I'm Nathan Thornberry. I'm with Priority Lab. We're out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and we're here because, well, number one, there was some sort of a sound recording equipment failure last year, so you didn't get to see the full video of what you're about to see today. But number two, because it's California, you don't have to beg me to come here. I'm from Indiana. The weather sucks. There's no beach. There's no mountains. We have a bike trail. That's our big thing. So, and roundabouts. Come anytime, visit. We have a roundabout convention. It's boring. We're here to talk about mold testing and why we didn't do it for 47 years at ServPro. And then about 2.5, 3 years ago, ServPro reaches out to us. They interviewed a few different labs, would never tell me their name, but it's okay, we know who they are. And ultimately, they came up with what they found to be an acceptable testing scenario for ServPro franchisees, considering things like liability, conflicts of interest, having customers, best interest at heart, all of those things. And they found that with us because of a few things that you'll learn here today. Like, for instance, our testing procedures and the ability to have a third party interpret it completely. Before we get started, I want to tell you the 3 reasons why this is really important to every ServPro franchisee, every single one of you guys. And I don't care which state you're in. We'll talk about some of the legality issues, which is only a 4-state issue. But for all of you, there are 3 things, and I couldn't decide last night when I was writing them down which order they went in. There was money, there's liability, and then there's customer experience. Those are basically the 3 things you have to worry about in any business on any given day. Are you making money? Are you risking your house and your home and your family's, well-being? And are your clients happy or sad? Those are your 3 things. So from a money perspective, here's what we found, and this was the first thing that we thought of when we were working with ServPro and working with the Resource Center, was how many of you are getting calls from potential clients, people that see those ServPro ads on TV and say, I need to test. I smell something funny. I had a problem. I see something funny, whatever it is, and they call you and ask for a test. Well, right there's a money-making opportunity in 2 ways. One, for the test, which is a pretty high margin scenario for you, and 2 is all the stuff that happens after the test, the remediation, all the work that comes along with it. And what we found when we were asking around with ServPro franchisees before we got started with all this was that they would get that call, they would refer them out to another testing facility, a third party, and then they'd never hear from the people again. And that's basically how it goes, because what are they being told? Who else are they being referred to? What else have they thought of since they got there? The second thing is the liability piece, and this was the biggest problem with ServPro deciding it was okay for you guys to do testing. It's obvious, it's common sense to any of us in here. If we're in a house and we're looking to do work and we do a test, wow, it came back that I do have a problem. Big surprise, right? So there's the conflict of interest on the front end in getting the work. Then there's the conflict of interest on the back end. You did the work. You don't want to have to redo it. You don't want to have to do it again. So that test is going to come back just fine, right? Big surprise. Well, we don't have that issue because all you do is follow a testing procedure, which we're going to go through in detail today. I want you to write down the first thing I'm going to have you write down today. It's moldtestingprocedures.com. That's moldtestingprocedures.com. It's got a 2-minute YouTube on every type of test that you can do. If you completely forget everything you saw in this video or live here in Sacramento today, all you have to do is go, yes, ma'am, or sir, I'll be happy to help you with that mold test. If you'll give me just 2 minutes, I need to go pick something up from my truck, and then you go out there, you pull out your phone, you watch the video on how to do a mold test, and you'll be fine. Go back in and be an expert. But from the conflict of interest standpoint, legal, risk management, training, administrative, everybody had the concern about liability. I stand here today, years into this, thousands upon thousands of tests being done, and I can say with absolute certainty that not once have we had a liability issue come back on a ServPro franchisee because of anything we're about to promote or propose to you today. So thus far, it's all on, all been good. and been zero downside and all upside. Now, we'd like to take that downside down even more. We're working on some things, always are. There's obviously some transitional things at corporate right now that we're going to stay away from, and then get back involved with risk management when the time is right. But let's get to the third thing, which is customer. This is the biggest thing. The biggest ROI that you can get is your customer satisfaction, your customer experience. So if a customer calls you and says, I want a mold test, and you say, here's an industrial hygienist number, did they have a good experience? No. They could have just gotten the test and gotten exactly what they wanted. If you do a mold remediation job and you don't test, nobody does, and as it turns out there was another spot of mold somewhere, something that was missed, is that a good customer experience? Absolutely not. So there's every reason for you guys to test. There's every reason for you to get paid for it. In some cases, you might not want to get paid for it. In some cases, you might not want to do it at all. And we're going to go through all of that today. And the only reason we know anything about any of this is Dr. John Shane, who's right here with the microphone. He's our lab director. I know enough to be dangerous. So, and by the way, we test for all sorts of things. We've been getting a bunch of asbestos jobs from you guys, some lead paint jobs from you guys. Just been incredible. When you guys don't have the ability to test something or don't want to or think that there's a risk and you would like a third party to do it, all you have to do is hit up your rep at our lab. They will connect you with somebody locally that has the exact same test on the exact same format of report. And we've been connecting you guys with local providers for that for the last 2.5, 3 years and have been problem free with the exception of one person who didn't pay, so we wrote the check. But today we're going to talk primarily about mold. So let's first talk about states with limitations and compliance issues. Dr. Shane, what are those 4 states?
Those 4 states are Texas, Florida, New Hampshire, and New York.
So let's assume, and you can say stood up and be a part of this circus. Let's assume that somebody either watching the video or in this room is from Texas, New Hampshire, New York, or Florida. We already know of one, but she's a licensed assessor. Anyone else from one of those states by show of hands? All right. Well, here's the good news. Not one of those states has had the sense about them to say, you know what? We're going to have a law in our mold assessment licensing to say that the mold assessor cannot be related in any way to the person doing the work. That doesn't exist in the law. So if you want to do what our friend from Miami did, and I'm sorry, what's your name, ma'am? Morena? Morena, okay. Like Morena did, she went through the whole assessor's course. How long did it take you? 3 days. That's all it took, 3 days. And not everybody in the company needs to be a licensed mold assessor, just one, it's fine. And have them go and do the test. Otherwise, everywhere else in this country, you're good, and it's a similar kind of ability to get that license anywhere else, whether it be Texas, Florida, New Hampshire, or New York. So let's talk about training requirements. Anybody know the training requirements for mold? What would you like to see done for anyone that needs to be trained, Dr. Shane?
Everybody that is trained should be able to take an adequate sample, know when to sample, when not to sample, and that's pretty much it.
That's right. And when we got together several years ago, so Dr. Shane wrote the protocols, wrote the lab book on how to test for mold at many different labs before we started Priority Lab and Inspector Lab together. And one of the things that we really wanted to do was simplify the process. And we're going to talk about our comparative analysis, indoor air quality testing, and surface testing as well. But let's go into our lost opportunity here. Number one thing that you guys need to be aware of is testing as a service. And we'll get into pricing on that a little bit later. The second thing is testing as a lead source. So if somebody calls you and says, I don't know if I have a problem. Well, do you smell something? Do you have some sort of problem that you've identified? Great, let us have a test and then you go into, what you would quote to remediate the issue. Testing to find hidden sources of water and mold, and testing to see if there's a larger scope of work. So before you get done, before you take down the plastic from one section of the house, you might test inside and outside of that plastic just to see if there's anything you missed, which again is a customer benefit. If you have another part of the house that has been affected by water, has mold growth being exhibited, and they don't take care of it during the course of this insurance claim, if it's a big enough job for an insurance claim, what do you think the insurance company says later when they try to add this, months or years down the road? They say no. They decline it. So here's the other thing, and I never saw this coming. I always thought the idea of a ServPro franchisee saying, yeah, we can come out and do an indoor air quality test. How big is your house? Well, gosh, it's 2,000 square feet. No problem. We'll come out. We'll do 2 indoor tests, 1 outdoor test. You'll learn why that's correct in a few here. And that'll be $350. Okay, cool. But I never saw this. I have ServPro franchisees that go in after their own jobs, whenever it's a job over a certain number, and for all they're paying us in lab fees, what's our ServPro lab fee?
$17.
$17 per sample. And you just overnight the samples to us. We have them out the same day. For the 3 samples they're going to do, they just go in and test every job that's over 10 grand. Why not? They don't necessarily throw the report back to the client. They keep it in a file, or they go over it with their guys. They go over it, when they're debriefing on the job. Very interesting things that you guys have done. I'm going to learn more from you guys as we go. Yes, sir. Say it.
Every water loss you're doing, or every remediation?
Mold remediation or water loss. It didn't have mold remediation though, not like smoke and fire. We're not talking about that. That was your question, correct?
Yeah, just what you said. I didn't know if they were trying to quantify or qualify every water loss, or if they were just doing their PRBs on the remediation. But I assume they'd be doing
Just water loss stuff. And the first guy that brought this up as an idea to me was out west, big franchisee, and he was sick and tired of one thing that happened to him about 2 to 3 times a year. Somebody would have a $30,000 mold remediation bid from an insurance loss. He would go in, do all the stuff, everything's done perfectly, and lo and behold, 3 weeks later, some industrial hygienist that knows more than all of us about everything sells those people a report that tells them about how all of their problems are still there, and it doesn't really say anything. It's kind of a weird report that some of these guys come out with. And he didn't like the idea that they could pull a report and have numbers of spore counts and all this stuff, and he had no defense to it other than to say, well, we followed protocol. That was it. So by simply taking these 3 things, it kind of gave his guys something to do. Like, here's what you're going to do when you're done with the job. You're pulling these 3 samples. And I think his guys have this idea that he's looking at the sample reports too and making sure that they did their job right. So it's kind of a good QA thing for all of us involved. So let's talk about mold testing now versus mold assessment, because all we're talking about today is mold testing. Now, you might want to talk about mold assessment. We'll talk about mold assessment for those 4 states, but let's define the difference, Doc.
Mold testing is simply going in and testing with the standard protocols, surface and air. And the assessment is much, much bigger in scope, where you're going in and you're doing a whole assessment of what needs to be tested, what needs to be not tested, and then a protocol for that remediation. Mold testing does not require that protocol.
Anyone here go by protocols when they do their mold remediation? Okay, so you guys are in some sort of state that's licensed, or you're not. For those of you not in a licensed state, who came up with the protocol? Yes, sir? Oh, you did. You raised your hand like I did, of course. And that...
I have CIC on staff, so.
Okay, so you have somebody with the letters that has gone through the course, and you have them on staff, and that's all good.
Give a couple of attorneys and they draft up.
Exactly. So you can do that. Otherwise, if it's a smaller job, I mean, it's just like bidding any other job. Who's the expert in where water goes, what it does to structures, and how to get rid of it? probably you more than an attorney who writes something up, or even someone with a CIEC certification. I think you probably know as much as they do, although if they're sitting right next to you, you can apologize to them and then, all right, good. So mold assessment is not necessarily something that we're promoting you do. If you do that, we can be your lab too. We just make the lab report look a little bit different. What we're talking about today is mostly just the mold test, where we give everything either a thumbs up, it's good, or a thumbs down, it's bad. Now, for those of you who haven't went out and gotten the alphabet soup of certifications, let's talk a little bit about mold theory from the doc. And if you guys have questions, this is an open forum. I will come to you right away. This is what mold needs to grow. Doc?
So I spent a good time in good deal of time in court explaining to lawyers the pyramid, and most people learn it as a triangle of mold. The thing that you need every one of those points of the pyramid for mold. That includes time. So it's not just 3, it's 4 things. So that part is really important. You need all 4 of those things, with the time being the important part for mold growth, because mold can grow within 24 and 48 hours. Well, mold grows virtually the minute it hits water. It germinates and starts to grow. But it takes 24 to 48 hours to disseminate those spores into the air.
And that's what we're worried about mostly when we talk about mold and indoor air quality is sporulation, its process of reproducing. So what's our goal for testing?
The goal for testing is to find out whether or not you've got a problem. Finding mold is not a big deal. Everybody's got mold. You can find mold anywhere. But what we care about is, do you have proliferation in the air above a threshold? And now that we know that there are no thresholds that are binding in the United States, but we have our own thresholds because our database is so big. We draw on about 1 million samples in North America to say what is a normal home and whether or not you have a problem or not. Because that algorithm says, do you have this much mold, and of what kind, and in what association, what's outside, and what is your zip code and time of year. So with that, we make that assessment on whether or not you've got a problem or whether or not you have a normal situation. Because just having one of the black mold is not important. 1 or 2 spores of Stachybotrys or Chaetomium is normal. Everybody, if you're doing a remediation and you have 2 Stachybotrys spores left, that's normal. It's not going to fail, and you can't fail a job for just that. So that's really important. So when you assess the effectiveness of your remediation protocol and your actual remediation, that becomes really important, that huge database on whether or not it trips a problem or not, or growth or not, that's important.
And here's the problem. I did this in Canada. We have 1 mold assessor here. Anyone else have a mold assessment license or something like it? You, sir, and you, sir. All right. So let's do the, let's do a challenge. Let's do a comparative challenge. So let's throw out a normal comparison where you would say, here's your outdoor number, here's your indoor number of a certain type of mold that nobody agrees on out there.
That nobody agrees on?
Yeah.
Okay. So normally, industrial hygienists and other labs, if they make any determination at all.
Let's not do the story yet. Give me an outdoor spore count and an indoor spore count on a commonly found mold spore type, and let's see if the 3 have an idea of whether it's good or not and can agree.
Okay, you've got 100 Penicillium aspergillus spores outside, and you've got 500 Penicillium aspergillus spores inside.
On both samples or just 1?
Inside, you got
2 samples inside. Did both of them have the 500?
Both of them have 5 to 700.
5 to 700 on 2 samples on the inside, 100 Penicillium aspergillus spore count per meters cubed. So, is that okay? That's not okay. That's not okay. Is that okay? Yes, it's okay. And is that okay?
It's okay. It's below 1,000, but I want to know what the outside conditions were with the outside test.
All right. So, All right, so here's the problem. All three of these good folks here went and got approved education, good education, paid for it, went for days at a time or even longer potentially, and all three had a different answer to the same question that there shouldn't be. So what we did was we took everything from your source, everything from your source, and everything from your source, and then we applied it to an algorithm and our database that we've had for many years with more mold data than anybody else has out there. And we said, all right, here's the level at which we're going to say it's fine, here's the level at which we're going to say it's not fine, and here's the level at which there's a range where we're going to have a person look at it. So for those of you in the room that are already using Priority Lab and you submit this stuff and as soon as it gets received, you see the report come out almost immediately, that means that the number was clearly on one end of the spectrum or the other. If they're in the range, we review and we hand review. Doc Shane, what would be the correct answer according to us? Because that's all we have. There's no other authority. So according to us as our own self-proclaimed authority, what is the correct answer to the 100 outdoor versus 500 to 700 indoor?
It's normal.
There we go.
That is a normal mold count.
And you weren't told wrong. It's just a matter of there's too much information out there and none of that information was drawn up using the idea of what would happen if somebody got this result and was told it's bad or it's good. It was, more of an educational thing, right? Yes, sir.
No, that indoor count you mentioned, which is 6 or 7 times above outdoor, is that inside of containment or in the house but outside containment?
That was not assumed. Whether it was in containment or outside of containment was not assumed in the question. It was just whether, in fact, in the question, it wasn't even assumed that there was remediation done yet, right? It was just, because again, we're your lab, you're going to take a sample, you're going to send it into us, we're going to put a report out, and we're going to say on that report so that you don't have to, it's good or it's bad.
So this is kind of a customer saying, hey, I haven't had water damage, I don't know, whatever, I just want to know if my house is at healthy levels or not, or normal levels, right?
Or they call in because they see mold, or they call in because they think they smell mold, or whatever it is. Whatever the reason for them asking you for test, or you just did remediation for them and they want to test. Well, what are their options? They could have you do it, they could do it themselves, or they could hire a third party. Here's your 3 options. But have that one option there and tell them, and use these words. If I do the test, it goes through a third party lab and they interpret the results. You're welcome to pick up the phone and call them if you have questions on those results as well. And we handle all of that for you. So let's talk about those testing types real quick. We have 3 basic types. We have our indoor air quality. That's our comparative analysis, the thing we just talked about. For those of you who might have been lost on that one, where we have an outdoor level of X, we have an indoor level of hopefully not X plus too many, right? And then we have surface testing, which is done with 2 media types generally, a swab and a tape lift. And then it says vehicle testing here. Now, usually we would add bulk testing here as the 3rd one. I don't know why we had to drop it. We could have just had 4. But bulk testing is where you're handed a piece of something. So someone hands you a piece of their house, or you walked into a house and a piece of the house fell and was bequeathed upon you. If you would like to send that in to have it tested, we can do that. The other testing that we've been doing with some of the ServPro franchisees through the commercial accounts has been vehicle testing. So we came up with a protocol for that and how we do it. We're probably not going to talk about that too deep today because it's not very many of you. But we are going to talk about what you need first for each type of testing. It's on the form in front of you. But Doc Shane, go through the list.
So you buy a pump from us, and the main thing is that it has to be a calibrated pump. So we have a primary standard, and we calibrate your pump to a primary standard, give you the data on 30 data points, and the date, and what % tolerance you have to that threshold of 15 liters a minute. And that's an annual calibration that we do for free. You send it to us, we send it back and put your calibration certificate online. You never want to be caught without a calibrated pump. If you don't have a calibrated pump, it's like you're speeding and they gun you at 120 miles an hour in a 50-mile-an-hour zone, how do you know he's right? The first thing you want to do is, where's the calibration certificate for your radar gun? Because I don't believe you. So the same thing, if you don't want to be litigated, the best way to stay out of that for the testing side is to have a calibrated pump with the pump certificate. And that's what you want to do. So there's two kinds of pumps. We sell them. You need a stand. Everything has to be taken 3 to 6 feet above the ground in the breathing zone for the air, and swabs and tape lifts. And that's why one of the reasons we don't talk about mold testing, or bulk testing, is that we prefer that you swab it and not send the bulk in, because most people send lots. If you're going to send a bulk sample, send in an inch square. We don't need the whole tile.
One important thing to mention there is every single ServPro franchisee gets lifetime calibrations on all of their pumps for free. All you have to do is ship it to us. So once a year, you ship it to us. We will do the calibration. We will even keep an electronic record of all of those calibrations. So there's nothing else to put on your list of things to know other than have that thing come back once a year. And pretty soon our app will be telling you, hey, it's time to send it back, and we'll advise you as such. On to the next thing, or did we already cover all?
We covered it.
We covered all of them. Great, then let's go to testing procedures. So we have our surface sampling, our air sampling, and then we're going to go through our chain of custody. You're going to have to guide me on which slide I go to here. I got
the next one.
The next slide. All right. Well, that's good that they're in order, because that would really screw things up. But
here's the main thing: well-taken samples lead to good results. That's common knowledge. So if you look at the next sample, that, by the way, are two of my favorite molds. Air sampling should be done at 15 liters a minute for 10 minutes. That's what the cassettes are rated for. You don't want to short cycle the flow rate, and you must verify your calibration on your pump before you take samples at the job. That's the way to stay out of trouble. And you can go 15 liters a minute for 5 minutes if you got high debris. I don't recommend it because it's almost never too high of debris. 10 minutes. The aerosols that we sell are rated for 10 minutes at 15 liters a minute. And in-wall samples are the short cycles, the 30 seconds samples. Those are in-wall cavity samples.
The pump we send you, whichever pump you get, which, by the way, on your form there are two pumps. One of them is battery powered. You don't have to go looking for a plug. That battery powered one also, when you turn it on, it just goes for 10 minutes and then it turns off automatically. The other one just has an on-off switch, and you got to plug it in. So it's most people that buy the lesser pump eventually come back to us and buy the more expensive pump just because it's more convenient and they've made plenty of money on the mold testing. But you don't have to remember the 15 liters for 10 minutes or for 5 minutes or for 30 seconds. The only reason you want to know it is because when somebody gets in a room with you and they have all these letters behind their name and they want to challenge you on your test, you say, no, I took it from right here and it was 15 liters for 10 minutes. It's the only reason you need to know it is so that you can repeat it back if challenged on site.
So if you're going to do surface sampling, there are two ways: tapes and swabs. We prefer the swabs because the tapes are almost always oversampled. These biotapes, if you're going to do a biotape, make sure that you bend it in a J shape and barely touch the surface, because we look at these things with transmitted light, and if you can see the sample on the tape, we can't see the sample because it's blocking the light. So on the next slide, you'll see swabs. Swabs don't matter about oversampling because we will subsample a swab. So we prefer the swabs, except if you're doing vehicle testing. We can talk about that if you want, especially at the booth. We like biotapes for that because they're pretty clean. But swabs are the way to go, so you'll get a growth, no growth determination. And then the really important thing is chain of custody. The way to really stay out of trouble is to fill the chain of custody out properly. ServPro has barcodes, so you don't have to fill in your company information. We'll scan the barcode. It'll fill in all your company information. What you need to fill in are the client name and address, etc. And down below, make sure that you sign and date when you sample and when you release, because we want a complete chain of custody. This is a legal form. So a lot of you get records from us that are subpoenaed you don't even know about because the insurance company is asking us for all your records because somebody's looking at a job. And so what you don't want to do is you don't want to get caught short on the chain of custody. But on the next slide, we have an app that's so much more convenient than a paper chain of custody. All your stuff is here. Instead of having to fill out in writing, you just take a picture of the serial number of the air cell. You don't have the fat finger mistake, go back and type over. You just take a picture of the serial number of the cassette. Everything else is a pull down. Even the location is, you can take a picture of the location so for your own records. And then the flow rate and time is there. On the next screen, everything else is a fill-in for you. But down at the bottom on the right-hand side, you can see right here, all you have to do is type in verified calibration, 15 liters a minute, the time. And when you finish, type it again, verified calibration, after you verify the pump. And that is forever married on your chain of custody. So you don't have to remember when you're litigated, when you're litigated, when they ask you for, where's your pump calibration form? And did you verify the pump calibration? You won't even have to guess. Say, yep, there it is. It's on the app. Here it is. You're done. No one will ever question your data. And that's the best way to stay out of trouble, because when I'm in deposition, that's the very first question I ask is, where's your pump calibration certificate? If the answer is I don't have it, we're done. And you pay.
And let's make this really simple for you. That form that you guys have in front of you with the equipment, you really need that equipment in order to do mold testing. If you happen to already have that equipment, that's great. What I would encourage you to do, if after I tell you all the scenarios in which you don't want to do testing, because we do have a 100% clean record on this, zero liability from testing for all ServPro franchisees, and we work with a ton of them. We've done thousands and thousands of tests. But if you go to your that form and you fill it in, even if you're not going to buy a pump, we can send you credentials for the Inspector Lab app and for the Priority Lab website access. Okay, Inspector Lab and Priority Lab are the same thing. We're just known in other industries as slightly different names. When you log in, all you have to do is say new sample and fill in the boxes. Don't worry about too much detail here on because it just guides you through it. It's very simple. It's easy to use. Download it at least for one person on every truck that has one of these pumps, and you're good to go. So let's give you some pricing guidance. I'm going to start with that a little bit. Most of our clients in the marketplace that are doing good volume are charging somewhere between $75 and $125 per sample. Now you will hear, if you go to one of these schools of alphabet soup and you're in a room of industrial hygienists and people that do really good job of environmental testing, you will hear some of them say, I don't do an indoor air quality test for less than $500. What you will not hear them say is that they have seen every single episode of General Hospital. Okay, they are at home. They are not going out into the field actually selling anything. So if you want to sell something, take the pricing advice, and I'm giving a range for a reason. We're not going to all come together and say, here's the price. But you should be in that $75 to $125 per sample, especially if you're already there. And you might even go less than that. You might even go free. Just depends on the circumstance. Anyone name a circumstance under which you might do a sample for free? What? If it fails and you do a little bit more remediation, you need to come back and make sure that it's good. That's great customer service. I like to hear that. What else? What other reason might we have to do a mold test for free? I mean, it's a $17 lab fee. It's a $25 overnight for everything you took that whole day. We're talking about pennies and peanuts. So why would I do it? I mean, if I'm in the business of doing mold remediation and insurance work and everything else, and somebody calls and, gosh, it's on my way home, they're concerned about something they see on the wall, and they're a great client that refers me 3 jobs a year, I might just stop by and do a swab right there for nothing. That would just be good customer service. That's all. There could be other scenarios. Again, you want to remember we have that annual free calibration, so make sure you send those in once a year. That on-site verification that you've done the calibration is as simple as Doc said. Just write down verified flow rate before test, verified flow rate after test. So you don't have to say before and after test, you just say the time. And guess what? We have a flow rate meter that's on the pump for you. You can't mess it up. Now here's how you're getting samples to the lab. You're overnighting them generally. Most people like to know what their results are now. If they ordered a mold test from you, they want to know today. Well, we can't do it today because if you haven't noticed, we're in California and our lab is in Fort Lauderdale. But we have overnight shipping labels that are the exact same price for every single ServPro franchisee throughout the US and Canada. 100% of everything you fit in there is going to be 25 bucks overnighted to Fort Lauderdale. You might have a $5 solution because you're next door, or just stop by. We're right off Commercial and the tollway there. So, but most people just find the nearest FedEx and drop everything that they took for the day off, and that's it. And if you've used the app, you don't have to submit it with an additional piece of paper. If you have samples that are, which samples do we put in the Ziploc bag? I know we put bulk samples, but are you talking about tapes as well?
All samples should go in a Ziploc bag because occasionally the shipping bag tears open and it's harder for a Ziploc bag full of samples to go through a hole. But if you're not in a Ziploc bag, a swab or an aerosol will slip out and it arrives without a sample. And we'll let you know, we'll take a picture of it, let you know, but Ziploc bag's the best to keep everything in the envelope in case it gets torn.
Now, I really hope all of you use the app. One of the reasons why we did that, and we're the only lab in the world that has an app, still to this day, after 5 years. Reason we wanted it was because you take samples. You tell the customer that you're going to have a result for them tomorrow. You put it in the FedEx and try to track it, I guess, but the lab doesn't know it's coming. So if you put in a mold test in the app, we know it's coming. If it doesn't show up, we can reach out to you. We can try to figure out what's going on. So let's talk about interpretation of results and some lab support. Let's just go to this first one. So here's a control sample that was taken after all inside samples are taken. Well, it should have been. Doc, what say you?
Yeah, this is really important. Always take an outside sample first because here, even though it's listed first, you can see the Penicillium aspergillus are really high, exceedingly high. And when we see something like this, we'll call the client. They said, oh yeah, we took the outside sample last. And we said, we know that because you contaminated yourself and your product inside, and when you took the outside, it now looks just like the inside. You've wasted your money, and it invalidates the test. Either you got to throw out the outside and give them a report without a control sample, or do the sample over. So always take an outside sample first before you go in the house.
Now, this is all covered on that video in moldtestingprocedures.com, but there's a few alternatives for you to know because you might have already been in the house. Again, this is pretty plug and play. We give you the cassettes to take the air samples. We give you the pump to connect it to. We tell you where to put it. It's easy. But don't be inside the house and then do nothing about it when you go to take the outdoor air samples, because this seems illogical, but it's true. If you were inside the house and you have the amount of spores that we have because we're in this room, and you turn on that pump and you open that cassette, everything from your hands is going to suck right into that, and it's going to mirror exactly what's going on inside the house. So here's my best suggestion to you. Everyone has a Buffalo Wild Wings near them, right? Eat there once. This is what I do, like once every few months whenever I run out of wet wipes, and steal all the wet wipes off the table. And then you're good. You just wipe your hands off with those, you are good to go. Buffalo Wild Wings, the official wet wipe of Priority Lab, Inspector Lab, and ServPro. It works, though.
It could be, yes.
Yeah. All right, so this is just generally, though, this is what our reports look like. You're going to have the report, the sample type, where it was located, what date it was done, and then, this is a control and a normal, one that we would call out and say, hey, are you sure you didn't do the following? And our customers are pretty good. It doesn't matter whether they're home inspectors, industrial hygienists, just professional environmental testing companies, or you guys. When we call somebody and say, we think you contaminated it, I would say a good 9.5 out of 10 times, they'll just go out and take another sample just in case. And we won't charge them for the secondary analysis. It's all good. It's just all for the customer, right? So here's another one. Normal sample, no problem. What do you see, Doc?
Yeah, I'll have to get a little closer. Oh yeah, so this is normal also. This just gives you a range of things that are included, but here's a Stachybotrys that's 2. That's the big black mold. Black is just a color. It doesn't mean anything about toxicity or allergenicity, and it's normal. You should see 1 or 2 of those in a house. 10% of all homes tested across the United States, it's the published data, have Stachybotrys chaetomium, have black mold in them as a matter of course. So just having a spore or 2 is not a disaster. So that's a normal range.
2 spores could have flown in on the back of a mosquito and been very near the testing media. That's all it could mean. Here's one with some problems. So now that we've seen all the good ones, that's what it's supposed to be like. Here's a problem. How do we know it's a problem, Doc?
Yeah, so this one's really important because this is how you drive larger scope of work, which drives money to you and does a better job for your client. So what we see here is we take an outside sample, we go inside, and they've got a swab and an air sample. And you can see that the Penicillium aspergillus here, that's high, but it came from Penicillium. So we know, because Penicillium aspergillus in the air, all the spores look the same, so we have to group them. But we know that it's Penicillium. Okay, that's not a big deal for you, but it's important for the lab. But here's the so what. See this one right here, this Dicema ascotricha? Really common mold on wallboard. And what has happened, because we ask you to take an air sample whenever you take a wall sample of mold, because you want to know, does the wall sample, problem and type, match the air? If they don't, you got a deeper hidden problem, just like this. They took an air sample, they didn't find it on the wall, they took an air sample, and you got a huge problem that you don't see, so that drives a bigger scope of work. You got to go find it because you don't want to go and not test the air, have an industrial hygienist come and say, you failed. And that mold showed up out of the blue.
By the way, for all the people in here that took all of these advanced courses and went through days or weeks or whatever, do you really memorize every name of every type of mold? No. So he does, but us normal people, we don't. So what we like to see is this thing with only the ones that are a problem at the top. If they're not in red, not a problem. If they're up at the top and they're in red, this thing that he rattled off, saying that Astrotricha is a common wallboard mold. I mean, who walks around knowing that kind of crap, Nobody. So all you have to do is go to the next page. We put it right on the front of the report. And it'll tell you anything that was listed as a problem will have where it's commonly found, what it probably means, whether it's a mold that would typically be from a water event or not. And you'll see here allergy potential for type 1, hay fever, and asthma potential. Let's talk about medical in a second here. But if somebody just got this because they had a weird smell or whatever, well, that would tell them. So let's talk about when not to test, just official kind of ServPro stuff, because I don't believe in letting liability concerns lead me around, and guide my business decisions. But they're real, and the stakes are very high here. Here's the one thing I would tell you: if you do not offer testing, whether it's through you or through a third party, and somebody has a problem still after you do your job, boy, they don't come back to you and say, well, I was gonna, sue you, but you were just so nice. No, they come after you. If you tested and you can show that it was fine that day, or you can show that it wasn't fine that day, then you are in the clear. And we find this in other industries that we participate in. People that test for mold don't get sued over mold issues, but still we don't want to be, suicidal about it. So general residential jobs, perfectly fine to do the testing. Once we get into big commercial jobs or industrial jobs or health or regulated jobs, government jobs, that sort of thing, just don't do it. Not worth it. We could probably come up with good protocols for those. We could probably come up with, some sort of ROI matrix on why it's worth the risk, but it's just not worth discussing yet. We still have tens of millions of dollars per month in job and testing related revenue that this franchise system could get if they just adopted this simple thing that takes $250 to outfit a truck with, and watching this video. So that's what you need to keep in mind, is just do the residential stuff. You have Dr. Shane, and I didn't give him this big giant introduction, but when I hired him, one of the things that he said to me is, I need you know, it was like 6 or 7 weeks off a year. And he said, well, but he corrected himself. He said, I don't really need it off. I mean, I'll be available. I'm going to review reports every day. I'm going to go over stuff with the lab, et cetera, et cetera. But I have to be gone for 7 weeks a year because I speak at universities and all of this stuff on these issues. We're talking about the man who's probably most respected in the industry, the biggest mycologist around. You have 3 minutes to ask him any question you have that's burning about mold. Or you can sit there with your pen and fill out that form. Either way, I'll be happy. And we'll have a booth here all week, and we'll be talking to you. Yes, sir.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say, I've been working with you guys for like 2 years now, and we've tested over 250 properties, and like, he's always been there for me when I needed a question, like, I've called and talked to you, like, personally, and I just appreciate that very much.
And I appreciate.
Thank you.
Your services, I think it's great. I mean, we don't really use mold testing to make money. We're using it to get more mold jobs, and it absolutely works.
Who else in here is using us already? I didn't even think to ask the question. Oh, wow. All right. See, that's different. You come back, 20% of the room. Listen, you guys got other places to go and everything else. You can bring the form up to us, or
Who's got
you can bring
the
it
form?
to our booth.
Who's got the form? Okay, don't go away. Bring it up.
We have a form for
Oh, no.
the check-ins
Who's
and
got
everything.
the sign-up form for check-in? It disappeared. Maybe the girl took it.
I tell you what, don't worry about it. Just go. I'm sure it'll show up at the back of the room. Otherwise, thank you.